Marco's laugh echoed in my mind. You wouldn't last a day without me, Elena. That's when I decided our cozy suburban home would make a lovely, just-sold postcard to mail to his office. My name is Elena Vasquez, and life had a way of testing me. 5 years ago, I married Marco, a charming coworker with a sharp wit and an alluring smile. Fallen by a mutual passion for success, we became a power couple at the office, only to face our vulnerability at home. The dream of nurturing a family together began to crumble with each failed pregnancy test. The hallways of fertility clinics became painfully familiar as we exhausted options, drained emotions, and dwindled savings. By the time I felt the first flutters of life within me, I had weathered a storm of hormone injections and hope. It wasn't just one heartbeat echoing during the ultrasound. It was two. We named our miracles Gabriel and Sophia. Marco's initial elation at the news of twins soon faded into a distant interest. His involvement was sporadic at best, absent at most. Nights blurred with feedings and diaper changes, often solo endeavors as Marco distanced himself, citing workplace exhaustion. My love for the twins was unbounded, but in the dark circles under my eyes and the ache in my bones, I knew this wasn't the partnership I'd signed up for. Gabriel and Sophia arrived early, fighters from the start. While they lay in the NICU, I laid plans for their future. But Marco, he was like an anchor, dragging my determination through the murky waters of doubt. I pledged to myself that our children would never feel the burden of their father's inattention, a vow heavy with consequence and courage. The first year of their life tested everything I knew about strength. As my body labored to recover, my resolve strained under the weight of Marco's apathy. Support. He called his occasional peeks into their nursery, peppering his absence with excuses and unfulfilled promises. The inequality of our roles grew, a chasm I could no longer bridge with love alone. Yet, the thought of leaving never gained momentum for long. My father had grown sick, the kind of illness that drains life in slow sips. With my mother having passed years before, he had nobody else. And as for me, with no job and savings devoured by IVF, I was tethered to Marco's erratic benevolence like a boat adrift, dependent on his mercies and whims. That day when the vase shattered against the floor, the water drenching my skin, I understood the capacity of our bond's fracture. But I had made a choice to ensure it would not break me. I mopped the floors, silenced the warning of desperation in my heart, and planned. Because all it takes is a moment for fate to align with fortitude, and that moment had come. I just had to reach out and grasp it tightly. The morning sun slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across what was once a nursery, now a war zone of scattered toys and overturned furniture. Sophia's wails cut through the silence, a shrill reminder that today, like every other day, I would face alone. Gabriel, ever the explorer, had managed to find the one remaining family heirloom, a silver picture frame my grandmother had given me, and was using it as a chew toy. I wrestled it away, my heart sinking. The last piece of my past, the last bit of value I owned other than the roof over our heads, would soon have to be sold. The weight of that decision pulled at my chest, a physical ache that seemed to spread with each labored breath. As much as that frame was a symbol of my heritage, it was now a lifeline, a ticket to keep the lights on and the cupboards from growing bare. Marco, on the other hand, remained blissfully oblivious to the depth of our financial troubles. He had a knack for evading responsibility, an art form he had perfected over the years. I returned to the workforce not by choice but necessity, dropping the twins off at a daycare that drained an already sparse bank account. My absence from the office had made me a stranger in the world I used to dominate, my confidence replaced with apologies and hasty exits whenever the daycare would call about another fever or cough. My supervisors were understanding, yet their patience had limits I dared not test. Each sick day, each rush home felt like a twisted countdown to my professional demise. On one occasion, I mustered the courage to ask Marco for help, yet his excuses danced around any reasonable offer. "I can't. I have a meeting," he would say, or, "They're just kids. They get sick." The burden of solo parenting lay heavy on my shoulders, a mantle I wore out of love for my children, but it was wearing me thin. Resignation from my job was not a choice but a conclusion, the result of countless pressures culminating in a silent scream for reprieve. I confided in my father, whose frailty belied a fierce will. Elena, my girl, you've borne more than anyone should, he whispered, drawing me close. His hands, once strong, now trembled against my back. Let me take some of this weight. But how could I? His health teetered on a precarious edge, his life a finicky balance of medication and rest. Adding my burdens to his would be unforgivable. Yet, he insisted, adamant in his resolve. Family lifts each other up, he said, his voice a feather yet heavy with conviction. We'll find our way through this, just you wait. My father's assurance was a balm, but it couldn't replace a paycheck. The guilt was a routine visitor, making itself at home within me as I saw the worry etch deeper into his face with every passing day. I was trapped, not by love or duty, but by necessity, a slave to the circumstances I couldn't escape. The silver frame sold to a faceless buyer for a soul-crushing sum, all too soon spent on necessities. As I slid the money over the counter for a week's worth of groceries, the reality of my situation seemed to sharpen into painful focus. I was at the end of my rope, the ends frayed and unwinding. It was time for the charade to end. It was time to fight back. Uneasy light filtered through the blinds, casting a dull glow over the toys strewn across the floor. The walls of our home, a place that once harbored the whispers of shared dreams, now stood silent, guarding the secret of my crumbling marriage. As Marco's shadow loomed large and menacing within our lives, my space for hope dwindled. His ire had no bounds, no line it wouldn't cross. His voice, once soft and filled with affection, now clenched with contempt. He was a tempest, his anger the crashing waves, and I, a ship made of glass, threatened to shatter with the smallest misstep. The day he hurled his cell phone across the room, narrowly missing Gabriel, who giggled, oblivious to the danger, was the day my tolerance reached its nadir. But there was a spark, faint and flickering, in the gloom. A ray of light began to slip through the shadows. My father. With his health improving and Grandma finally settled into a nursing facility, he was determined to shoulder part of my burden. His arrival marked the first breath of fresh air in a home that had grown stifling. Lean on me, Elena, he urged, taking the twins in his arms with surprising dexterity for his age. I'm not made of glass. Let me help you rebuild. And so, with the twins in safer hands, I set off to reclaim the life I had on hold. I reached out to Isabel, my former boss and mentor, who had risen through the ranks with a grace I had always admired. The call was the first step in executing the plan that had brewed in the recesses of my mind, our small act of defiance against Marco's tyranny. Isabel, it's Elena. I'm thinking of returning to work, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Isabel's response was prompt, sympathetic to the point of painful. I suspected as much, she confided, a hint of something more in her tone. There's been something you should know about Marco. Can you come in tomorrow? The next day, the old familiarity of the office wrapped around me like a well-worn glove as I sat across from Isabel. Despite our formal attire and the polished wood of the desk between us, the atmosphere was intimate, protectively confidential. He's been unfaithful, Elena, Isabel divulged, cutting straight to the heart of a truth I had already sensed. With a client's daughter. It's more than gossip. There are receipts, and, well, people have seen them together. The realization stung, a sickening confirmation of the distance between us, yet it was ammunition for what was to come. It propelled me forward, a catalyst for my resolve. I laid bare my intentions for divorce, my need for independence, and Isabel responded not just with support, but with action. She fast-tracked my return to the company, championing my cause with the vigor of a true ally. With every piece that fell into place, I saw the path before me clear, and with a surge of newfound courage I was ready to make move. The evening I set my plan in motion. The house felt larger, the silence louder. Outside, the sunset bled across the sky, a canvas of defiance. Inside, my father whispered stories to the twins as I packed their bags, preparing for the upheaval to come. Marco's business trip was a timely blessing, and with the ink still wet on my letter of resignation, I knew there would be no turning back this time. Every item packed away, every photograph removed from the walls, was a declaration. I was off to change the locks, hand over the house keys to the realtor, and finally step out of the prison Marco had unwittingly built around us. The following morning I left our now bare house, the echo of emptiness reverberating with each step I took. Walking into the office, my nerves buzzed undeniably. A mix of anxiety and adrenaline surged through me. The familiar sights and sounds of the workplace greeted me like old friends long missed. Isabel welcomed me with a warm, conspiratorial smile that did little to quell the flurry of butterflies in my stomach. "You're doing the right thing," Isabel reassured, her gaze steady, her words a solid anchor. "You're taking back control." Her office, once a place where I got career advice, now served as the backdrop to the unfolding drama of my personal life. Isabel closed the door with a decisive click and, without preamble, unveiled Marco's betrayal in somber detail. He had taken far more than his share of liberties. His affair with the daughter of one of our clients, not just an insult but a liability. It wasn't just our company's reputation at stake, but his professional future. Images of them together lurched at me from the fringes of my mind, yet the revelation steeled me. I wouldn't let his indiscretions be my undoing. "Thank you," I murmured, the weight of the situation settling around me like a cloak. "He won't get away with this." Isabel proceeded to lay out the groundwork for my return to work. As it turned out, they needed someone with my expertise and experience. "It's your second act, Elena," she said, her voice a blend of excitement and firm resolution. But the opportunities didn't end there. After discussing possible starts and positions, Isabel revealed another game-changing detail: a newly implemented on-site daycare, a solution to one of the many complicated puzzles of my life. There was a light at the end of the tunnel, and it was finally bright enough to chase away the shadows that had settled in my heart. Armed with this fresh knowledge and a plan that grew bolder by the minute, I left Isabel's office poised for the impending confrontation. The empty house wasn't just a sign of a life shed. It was the first stone in the foundation of a new one. My father, God bless his resolute heart, backed me every step of the way. It was our secret, a quiet rebellion danced out in the signing of papers and whispers of change. The real estate agent, understanding the delicacy of the situation, had agreed to act quickly. As I met with the realtor, who was keen to capitalize on the property's prime location, I signed off on what was undeniably my most assertive act yet. The house was more mine than Marco's, purchased with my pre-marriage savings and therefore mine to sell. I reflected, not without a twinge of irony, how little Marco had cared for the old place, dismissing it as a temporary inconvenience while we climbed the corporate ladder. Yet now it would become the very instrument of my liberation. The plan was set into motion with a precision that would have impressed even my toughest critics at work. With the realtor's help, we moved swiftly, securing a buyer and moving my family into a comfortable rental. My father, with renewed vigor, was already making the space our own, filling it with laughter and plans for the future. As I lay in bed that evening, staring at the ceiling in the quiet before sleep, the enormity of what I'd done began to sink in. I'd taken back my life, my children's future, and secured our escape. There was no turning back now. The glass doors of the office building seemed heavier than I remembered, but today they parted with the promise of new beginnings. A chorus of unfamiliar yet friendly faces welcomed me, the employees I would soon work alongside. With each step, I anchored myself in the reality of my fresh start. The cloak of anonymity I'd worn during my time away had been shed. I was Elena Vasquez, soon to be Elena Vasquez, single mother and respected professional. Marco, however, remained a storm cloud on the horizon of my newfound clarity. It wasn't long before I heard the familiar cadence of his voice echoing down the hallway as he approached. There was a frantic edge to it, a discordant note that betrayed his composure. His eyes found mine, widening with a mixture of shock and anger. "Where have you been? Where are the kids?" he demanded, his voice sharp, betraying his usual facade of control. Resisting the impulse to back away, I stood my ground. "They're safe," I replied evenly. "They're with my father." Marco's gaze darted around, taking in the faces of our colleagues who had formed an ad hoc audience to the unfolding drama. Isabel stepped forward, her presence a shield between the past and my future. "Welcome back, Elena," she declared with a smile, cutting through the tension. "We've all been looking forward to this day." The assembled coworkers erupted into applause, isolating Marco with their camaraderie. He seemed to shrink, a figure diminishing in the light of collective support. Confused yet defiant, he spluttered, "What is this about? Why didn't you tell me you were coming back?" "Isabel, with the poise of someone used to handling delicate situations, responded, "Our company is a family, Marco, and when a member of our family is ready to return, we celebrate." A murmur of agreement hummed through the crowd. I watched as understanding dawned upon Marco's face, the implications of my return, the shattering of the narrative he had constructed for himself. "The daycare," he finally stammered. "The children, they must be." I cut him off, my voice steady, my resolve unwavering. "The children are well taken care of, and as for the daycare, we've been fortunate enough to secure spots for both Gabriel and Sophia." Isabel supplemented my words, addressing Marco. "Indeed, they'll be just fine here. We've made certain of that with our new facility." The room buzzed with whispers of commendation and encouragement as Marco realized the breadth of his miscalculation. He had assumed I'd crumble without him, that I'd be forced to compromise. But as the walls he built around me fell away, his own began to close in. "Let's discuss this privately," Marco hissed, reaching for my arm. Resisting his touch, I produced the single item that symbolized the end of our union, a business card from a divorce attorney. His eyes flickered with defeat as I announced, "Please divorce me, Marco." Gasps and whispers filled the room, and I watched as the mask of charm Marco had always worn dissolved into a frown of disbelief. He was silent, searching for words that wouldn't come. Each heartbeat in the silence felt like an eternity, but ultimately it was Isabel's voice that filled the void. "Marco, I think it's time you and the higher-ups had a conversation." Humiliation flared across Marco's face as he backed away, realizing his private indiscretions were far less private than he had believed. As the weight of his deeds crept upon him, he slumped his shoulders, defeated and exposed. I turned away, leaving the broken vase of our marriage behind, and with it the shards of our tarnished past. The flicker of twilight's last stand gave way to night's embrace, as I sat in the quiet comfort of our new rental home, the twins sound asleep in their freshly assembled beds. It was incredible how silence had once been my enemy, filled with the tension of waiting for Marco's critique or outburst. Yet here it was now, a peaceful testament to the change I had courageously enacted. My phone's insistent ringtone splintered the calm. Marco's name flashed on the screen, a vestige of the life I was steadily discarding. With a calming breath I answered, bracing for the storm I knew I had stirred. "Elena, what have you done?" Marco's voice, barely intelligible between sobs and fury, crackled through the speaker. "I've started over, Marco, for myself and for our children," I replied, my voice a beacon in the tumult. He was in disbelief, reeling from the discovery of my actions, the sale of the house, the relocation of our family. The life he had taken for granted, dismantled, sold off to the highest bidder. My heart might have winced at his confusion once, but that empathy had dissolved with every disparaging remark, every angry shout, every tear shed in solitude because of him. "Our house, our home, it's empty. Where are Gabriel and Sophia and all our things?" He was frantic, grasping at the fragments of control that slipped through his fingers like fine sand. Calmness steadied my response. "It's all taken care of, Marco. The children are with my father, and our possessions are here with us in our new place." "You sold our house without my consent? Without even telling me?" His incredulity suggested betrayal, the irony stinging like salt in a wound. "I did what was necessary, Marco. The house was mine before we married. I used my savings for the down payment, remember?" I spoke the truth he could not refute, the reality he had ignored in favor of his self-centered narrative. "The real estate agent worked with us to find a buyer. It's done. We are moving on." He struggled for words, lost in the labyrinth of his making. When they finally came, they were edged with despair. "I thought we were going to discuss this, figure things out. There's nothing left to figure out. It's over, Marco." My finger hovered over the end call button, ready to sever the last of our ties. But where will I go?" he pleaded, the mighty Marco reduced to echoes of vulnerability. "That's for you to decide. Just know that Gabriel and Sophia will always be cared for, with or without you." The finality of my words seemed to drape over us, a curtain closing on the theater of our farce. I wasted no time after the call, swiftly blocking Marco's number, a line I never thought I'd cross. In the days that followed, legal motions unraveled the entanglements of our failed marriage. Custody, assets, child support. An avalanche of documents and signatures wiped clean the slate, giving rise to my long-awaited freedom. Rumors of his affair saw Marco ousted from his lofty perch, and without the shield of our company's prestige, he eventually resigned. Last I heard, his pride had surrendered to necessity, placing him in a humbler line of work. The whispers of his downfall weaved through the industry like a cautionary tale, a high price paid for hubris and betrayal. Before me lied the blank pages of our lives, ready to be filled with the tales of our choosing. A chapter closed, a book ended, and the narrative was mine to write anew. The morning sun painted hues of gold and amber across the sky, casting a warm glow over the breakfast table where Gabriel and Sophia munched on their cereal with eagerness which only children possess. The atmosphere was serene, a stark contrast to the vortex of recent events. As we sat around the table, my father, the twins, and I formed a new picture, a frame of family redefined by solidarity and love. Those early days of our new life felt like living in a dream, one where I half expected to wake to the sound of Marco's voice demanding an explanation, but that never happened. The twins adapted with the resilience of youth, and over time, peace became our new normal. The transition back into work was smooth, even liberating. Colleagues who had once pitied me now greeted me with respect. My input was once again valued, my insights sought after, and my presence acknowledged. Isabel had checked in often, ensuring that the integration was seamless and that I settled into the rhythm easily. The on-site daycare was a godsend, offering not just convenience but a level of care and attention that left me reassured during the workday. As the days eased into weeks and the weeks meshed into months, we settled into a comfortable routine. Life without Marco's overbearing presence transformed from an initial breath-holding suspense into a deep, gratifying exhale. The fear of his volatility and the anxiety over our future had dissolved into a renewed sense of purpose and independence. Catherine had been true to her word. The whole office seemed to rally around me. Some came by just to tell me how they admired my strength. Others gently shared their own stories of overcoming difficulties. The solidarity was unexpected but deeply appreciated. Even the higher-ups, who were initially guarded, offered their unofficial nods of approval and encouragement. Of course, there were challenges. The twins, with their boundless energy and ceaseless curiosity, ensured there was never a dull moment. The balance between work, motherhood, and personal growth was a delicate dance, but one I was determined to master. Every step I took with a clarity I had not felt in years. I took my father's advice to remain involved with the community to heart. Being active in local events, meeting neighbors, and contributing to the twins' daycare activities provided a sense of belonging. In the shared experiences of parenting and bits of leisurely chats by the playground, I found companionship and a thread of connection weaving into the fabric of our new lives. Gabriel and Sophia burgeoned in this new environment, their laughter a confirmation that leaving Marco had been the right decision. When they hugged me tightly with tiny arms that promised eternity, I knew we had a bright future ahead. All things considered, the upheaval had led to a life more vibrant and fulfilling than I dared to imagine when trapped beneath Marco's shadow. My parents had instilled in me the values of strength, optimism, and resilience, qualities I aimed to pass on to my children. Looking ahead, I saw more than just a flickering light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. I saw brilliant sunshine painting our path forward. As I turned the key in the door of our new home, it was more than just an entranceway. It was a gateway to the promise of tomorrow. And with one last glance back at the road traveled and the traces of the struggle behind us, I stepped through with my head held high, ready for whatever awaited us on the other side.
If you don't want to work, then get out of this house. Even though I finally got a job offer. Having a freeloader like you around is demotivating and a nuisance. My sister Nicole, raising her voice in anger, blames me because she didn't like the dinner I made. So, that's why I. Cutting off my words, Nicole seeks help from our mother. Mom, say something. How long do you plan to keep this parasite in our house? This house is ours, right? Is it okay if our life gets harder because of someone like her? Well, now that Nicole has got a job, maybe it's time for the parasite to leave? It would be pitiful if she bothers Nicole. Ashley, you're old enough, so just leave the house. Hearing Nicole's words, our mother immediately takes her side. Empowered by having our mother on her side, Nicole goes even further. See, even Mom agrees, just get out. Don't ever come back. You're not part of the family anyway. Despite all the sacrifices I've made for the family. Realizing that they never cared makes me incredibly sad. Feeling that staying here is just foolish, I quietly make up my mind. All right, I'll leave. And I'll never involve myself with you, Mom, or Nicole again. That's fine with you both, right? Hearing my decision, Nicole and our mother point at me and laughingly say, "Of course, that's perfect. With one less parasite, we'll save on living expenses. Now pack your things and leave." That's right. I have Nicole, I don't need a parasite like you. Well, I'll leave tomorrow, but can I take all my belongings? Obviously. Make sure you take everything and never come back. Having a freeloader like you related to me is a stain on my life. Take all your belongings and get out. Understood. Then I'll take everything that's mine. As if you have anything of value, pretending to be strong. While Nicole and our mother mock me, they reach for the food I made again. I leave them to it and return to my room. My name is Ashley, and I am 29 and single this year. I live at home with my mother, her new husband Jason, and my sister Nicole. Before she remarried, our mother was kind to me too, but after Nicole was born, she doted on her and didn't care much for me. Ashley, you're the older sister, so give in to Nicole. But this is something I bought with my own allowance. Nicole wants it. Don't be so selfish. Our mother takes the clothes I bought and gives them to Nicole. Yay! I really wanted this dress. Nicole receives it from our mother with a smile as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Ashley, buy yourself some new clothes with this. Feeling down after having my clothes taken, Jason discreetly hands me some money so the others won't notice. Is that okay? I'm sorry I can't protect you more. Thank you, Dad. Jason is kind and tries to treat Nicole and me equally. But he can't often defend me openly in front of my strong-willed mother. However, having him there made me feel supported, the only solace I had. Thanks to him, I was able to go to college and graduate successfully. I'm going to live near the company once I start working. It takes too much time to commute from home. What are you saying? After we paid for your college, you're going to leave without repaying that favor? I won't allow you to live alone until you've repaid your debt to us. But if it takes 2 hours to commute to the company, I need to live closer. Wow, I'm appalled. You just want to make life easier for yourself by living away from your family. Anyway, I absolutely won't allow you to live alone. I had planned to leave home once I got a job. But faced with our mother's fierce opposition, I was forced to continue living miserably at home. Then, 6 years later. What? Dad has? Why so suddenly? He suddenly collapsed at work and didn't make it to the hospital in time. When Nicole started university, Jason suddenly passed away due to a sudden illness. What? I just started university. What are we going to do about tuition and other expenses? Our mother and Nicole only worry about their own future, leaving all the funeral preparations to me. Since you're not blood related to Dad, you shouldn't feel sad, right? You've been doing nothing but mooching off us at home, so at least be useful now. You're right, Mom. She's just a freeloader who lazes around at home even though she graduated from university. Dad just wasted his money on her tuition. Even during the wake, when it's just family, they continue to hurl abuse at me. Wanting to honor Jason's memory, I simply endure their insults. A few days later, after the funeral, we sort through the inheritance. Our mother and Nicole find a bank book in Jason's name and are delighted. Dad left us so much money, lucky me. Now I can buy the designer bag I wanted. That's great. Now we don't have to worry about Nicole's tuition or living expenses for a while. Maybe I'll buy some dresses too. Ah, of course, you don't get a share, Nicole. All the money Dad left is mine because I'm his real blood. You're not his real child, so you have no right to it. I never counted on inheriting anything from my stepfather. But Nicole still lashes out at me. I never intended to take anything in the first place. But since Dad left it, I just want it to be treated with care. Shut up. I don't want someone like you, who doesn't work and lives at home like a parasite, to worry about me. But I am working, you know. I've explained this many times. What? You say you're working while you're home all day? You're just delusional because you're an unmarried woman who can't make money and can't leave home, right? I definitely don't want to end up like you. No matter how often I explain my situation to Nicole, she never listens. However, I hope that once she starts job hunting, she might understand what my work entails. Thinking this, I, as an older sister, choose to overlook Nicole's harsh words. 2 years after our father's death, Nicole, now a junior in college, had finally started her job hunt. But perhaps because it's a tough process, she seemed more irritable than before. One evening, as we were all eating dinner, Nicole sighed heavily and said, "Ugh, I'm working so hard on job hunting and it's so exhausting too. Come home to see a freeloader lounging around the house. Isn't it unbearable? A freeloader? Who are you talking about? You, obviously. You don't even go outside, just lazing around the house. It's so annoying," I retorted to Nicole's accusation. Enough already. How many times do I have to tell you? I was working today, too. What? When I came back, you were leisurely reading a book on the couch. You call that work? That was a book related to my work. I've explained what I do to you many times. A job where you just stay home all day, fiddling on the computer or reading books, that's not a real job. Nowadays, even fresh graduates have to go to the office. Maybe the career you're aiming for requires going into the office. But there are jobs that can be done from home if you look. You're really annoying. I'm tired from job hunting. I don't want to hear a freeloader's ramblings. Nicole slammed the living room door and retreated to her room. Though I understood that job hunting was stressful, her increasing attacks on me were wearing me down. I sighed softly and looked over at our mother, who continued eating quietly. "Mom, Nicole won't listen to me at all. Can you please explain to her about my work? Maybe later. She's just stressed from job hunting. That doesn't mean she can act like this every day. I'm getting stressed too." Don't say that. Ashley, you're the older sister, so try to be more considerate of Nicole. Even when I asked our mother to persuade Nicole, she only pressured me to endure. Doubting the attitudes of our mother and Nicole, I continued to do what I could for my family. Then, one day, as I was bringing dinner to the table, Nicole screamed shrilly, "What is this meal? You're home all day and still make shortcuts in cooking. This week has been busy with work." It's okay to cut corners when I'm busy. If you have a complaint, why don't you cook for yourself? Ha, work? Your job, which can't even earn money, must be about managing the household perfectly, right? All you do every day is play on the computer or read books. That's why. I'm telling you, I am working. Just listen to what I'm saying for once. Despite my desperate responses, my words never reached Nicole. Glancing sideways at our mother, she just turned away, pretending not to notice. If you don't want to work, then get out of this house. Even though I finally got a job offer. Having a freeloader like you around is demotivating and a nuisance. So, that's why I. Cutting off my words, Nicole seeks help from our mother. Mom, say something. How long do you plan to keep this parasite in our house? This house is ours, right? Is it okay if our life gets harder because of someone like her? Well, now that Nicole has got a job, maybe it's time for the parasite to leave? It would be pitiful if she bothers Nicole. Ashley, you're old enough, so just leave the house. Hearing Nicole's words, our mother immediately takes her side. Empowered by having our mother on her side, Nicole goes even further. See, even Mom agrees, just get out. Don't ever come back. You're not part of the family anyway. Despite all the sacrifices I've made for the family. Realizing that they never cared makes me incredibly sad. Feeling that staying here is just foolish, I quietly make up my mind. All right, I'll leave. And I'll never involve myself with you, Mom, or Nicole again. That's fine with you both, right? Hearing my decision, Nicole and our mother point at me and laughingly say, "Of course, that's perfect. With one less parasite, we'll save on living expenses. Now pack your things and leave." That's right. I have Nicole, I don't need a parasite like you. Well, I'll leave tomorrow, but can I take all my belongings? Obviously. Make sure you take everything and never come back. Having a freeloader like you related to me is a stain on my life. Take all your belongings and get out. Understood. Then I'll take everything that's mine. As if you have anything of value, pretending to be strong. Nicole and our mother mock me as they reach for the food I made again. I leave them to it and return to my room. Later, I hurriedly searched for a new place to live. And managed to find an apartment available for immediate move-in. As I was moving in, my phone rang. Picking up, I heard a loud voice on the other end. Why did you take all the furniture and appliances? The house is empty because you took everything. Bring back everything you took right now. What are you talking about? Nicole, you were the one who said I should take all my belongings. So, I only took the things I bought with my own money. I didn't steal anything that belonged to you or Mom. What? What are you talking about, Nicole? Didn't Mom buy the furniture and appliances with Dad's inheritance? After the first anniversary of Dad's death, she replaced everything that was old. No, that's not true. I bought those furniture and appliances with my own money. Most of Dad's inheritance was used to pay off Mom's debts. I continued to explain calmly to Nicole. What? There's nothing left. Then, what about our living expenses until now? Nicole, unable to grasp the situation, muttered in a faint voice. If you're curious, why don't you ask Mom? As I suggested this, Nicole hastily turned to our mother nearby. What does this mean, Mom? That's, well. Hearing our mother's flustered voice, I sighed and spoke the truth. I was paying for everything, Nicole. The living expenses and your tuition fees, all of it. I've explained many times that I earn a decent salary working from home as a software engineer. No way. You're lying. You were just playing on the computer every day. How can you make money from that? You must have been using Dad's inheritance, right? And you squandered it? Nicole refused to believe my story and even started accusing me falsely. I pressed on with the reality. I earned over $5,000 a month as a freelance software engineer by studying hard on my own. More than half of that I put into our household expenses. But still, it's unbelievable that it would run out so quickly. The inheritance wasn't enough, and I covered the rest. And Mom continued to splurge, so there's no money left now. What? Then what about my tuition fees? If we can't pay, I won't be able to graduate from university. Didn't you have money left too? Why don't you use that? There's nothing left. It all went quickly because I bought department store cosmetics and brand items. That's why I told you to use it wisely. Nicole. What will happen if you can't graduate? We were counting on your salary. Mom, that's your problem. What will happen to me if I can't graduate? What? I don't know anything about that. As they blamed each other, I could hear Nicole and our mother shouting through the phone. Both seemed to finally understand their predicament, their voices tinged with panic. Well, if you can't pay the tuition, you'll have to drop out of university. And the job offer you received based on your expected graduation might even be revoked. That's terrible. Please, big sister, come back home. We're family, aren't we? If not, at least pay my tuition fees. Yes, if Ashley comes back, everything will be fine. Please, Ashley, you're our only hope. Let's live together as a family of 3, like before. After you drove me out and repeatedly called me a parasite. It's ridiculous to say we're family now. It's too late for that. With Nicole and our mother begging tearfully, I firmly ended the call and blocked their numbers. Later, Nicole and our mother, having lost the financial support I provided, failed to pay the rent for the house and were evicted. Unable to pay her tuition, Nicole was inevitably dismissed from the university. And her job offer was revoked as a result. Forced to drop out, Nicole managed to scrape by with multiple part-time jobs. Our mother, having rarely worked before, started as a cashier at a supermarket, but struggled with the unfamiliar work, leading to frequent arguments with Nicole over stress. As for me, I was finally living alone, enjoying the freedom and financial savings from not having to support the household. I decided to pursue my interests and walk my own path toward happiness. Who said you could sleep? It's just that I have a fever over 100 degrees right now. That has nothing to do with me. Just manage your own health. My husband taunts me as I lay in bed with a high fever. When I try to ignore him. Got some nerve ignoring me, huh? Stop it, please. He forcefully tries to drag me out of bed, grabbing my hand. I desperately shake him off, and he stumbles backward. That's when his switch flipped. Don't you dare defy your husband. That was when he hurled the empty wine bottle he was holding, aiming it straight at me. I instinctively covered my face. For a moment, I braced for death. Fortunately, his aim was off, and the bottle shattered against the window instead. Don't dodge. What are you doing? If that had hit me. It's because you don't obey me, and you don't even do the housework. I never said you could slack off. Then, a voice came from behind my husband. I can't just stand by and listen to that. My husband turned around immediately. Why are you here? He couldn't hide his shock at the person in front of him. I never imagined you'd go this far. There's a reason for this. How disgraceful. Reprimanded harshly, my husband quieted down and began to tremble with overwhelming fear. Perhaps he instinctively understood the fate that awaited him. But this wasn't the end. I was determined to settle scores for all I had endured up to now. I am Judy, 54 years old. I live in a house with my same-aged husband, Kevin. We met at a dinner party. I didn't know at the time, but our fathers were acquainted. I only found this out decades later. Nice to meet you. I'm Kevin Anderson. Oh, nice to meet you too. Honestly, I was reluctant about the dinner party. I thought living alone would be easier and better. So, I acted as standoffish as possible to make him dislike me. However, Kevin kept pushing his way into my life. What are your hobbies? Hobbies? I'm often at home, so I read books and do crafts. Those hobbies suit you, Judy. Is that so? Before I knew it, I was caught up in Kevin's pace. Eventually, I found myself dating him. I thought it was troublesome at first, but he kept a comfortable distance, making it not so bad to be around him. I think it's about time. About time? Yeah. How about we get married? Huh? Oh yeah. We met when we were both 25, and by the time we were 30. He had somewhat persuaded me into marriage. I thought it would be harder than it actually was. At 32, we had a daughter, and I thought this was how life would continue. I'm going to the hospital. Are you feeling unwell? A bit. But I think it'll be okay. After turning 50, I began to feel increasingly unwell without knowing why. So, I went to the hospital, where I received an unexpected diagnosis. Is that really true? Yes. It might be due to age, but it's likely changes in your female hormones. Is there a cure? Some people see symptoms subside within a year, while others may continue for up to 3 years. I see. Let's start with improving your lifestyle habits to minimize the symptoms as much as possible. I had heard about menopause from friends, but now it was my turn to experience it. When I got home, Kevin was waiting for me. So, what did they say? It's menopause. Menopause. So, are you okay? Huh? I couldn't help but raise my voice. A little rest should do the trick, right? Maybe, but... And thus, I would be tormented by Kevin's frivolity. As he suggested, I took some time off work. If it had eased my symptoms, I would have been content. But it wasn't that simple. Hey, are you okay? I have a headache. I'm sorry, but you'll need to manage dinner on your own today. What? Why? Why? Because I can barely move. You know I can't cook. Then maybe order takeout or something. Just get it ready. In the end, I had to prepare dinner for Kevin. All the while, he enjoyed his drinks while watching TV, as I battled a severe headache. When we first got married, we were supposed to support each other through life. After that, his attitude towards me never changed. I have something I want to discuss. A discussion? Hope it's not something bothersome. Bothersome? So? What is it? I'm thinking of taking a leave of absence from work. A leave? Don't you just lack motivation? That's not it at all. I'm really suffering here. Then, after some thought, Kevin reluctantly agreed. Well, you'll take care of the house in return. I'll try my best. Not try, you'll do it. His tone was so harsh it made me think he might be the one going through menopause. I wondered why he couldn't understand me. But thinking about it just made me more tired. Half a year has passed since I took my leave. Judy? Are you okay? Yeah, somewhat. You don't look okay at all. I was out shopping with a friend when I suddenly felt dizzy and collapsed right there. My symptoms didn't improve, and my worried friend called an ambulance. At the hospital, I received an 4 and my condition finally stabilized. Your husband is coming soon. So, don't worry. Is that so? Thank you. Despite my friend's reassuring words, I felt nothing but anxiety. I had been criticized so much that I expected nothing good now. That I had ended up in the hospital. About an hour later, Kevin arrived. Hey. Are you really okay? I was really worried. Yeah. I was surprised by his worried tone and struggled to respond properly. I had expected him to be angry, but he was surprisingly kind. I'm glad you're safe. I'm sorry for worrying you. Never mind. Just rest well today. For the first time in a long time, he spoke kindly, and I reveled in the happiness. I wondered when was the last time I felt this way. So, can you go home today? I'll rest a bit more and then go home. Okay. I'll be waiting at home then. Are you sure you're okay? I can make it home by myself. I was set to go home by evening. On the way, I had never wanted to see Kevin as much as I did then. I was eager to see what kind of face he would be waiting with. Hi, Kevin. However, the emotions I had felt vanished the moment I saw his face. You're late. Where have you been loitering? I came straight home. I doubt it. Well, it's time for dinner anyway. I was stunned. He hadn't been worried at all. Huh? Stop that, huh? Hurry up and get it ready, or I'll be in trouble. As I was told to, I started preparing the meal. I didn't have the energy to argue and just wanted to get through the evening. I'm going to rest now. Hey. There are still things to do, aren't there? I can't do any more today. Besides, if I collapse again and end up in the hospital, you wouldn't like that, would you? Well, that's true. But just for today. Without responding to Kevin, I went straight to bed and managed to sleep like a log. Mom is coming this weekend, so make sure you entertain her well. This weekend? That's in 2 days. What? Are you planning to tell her not to come now? It's not that, I just wish you had told me earlier. It'll be fine. Just make sure there are no slip-ups. I was a bit nervous about meeting my mother-in-law after so long. I wanted to entertain her well, as Kevin said. But wishing he was more reasonable was perhaps asking for too much. Then, the day before my mother-in-law was due to arrive. Hey. Mom's coming tomorrow, and look how dirty this is. He pointed at the table, which was a mess from his drinking earlier. I'll clean it up now. Arguing with Kevin would do no good, so I focused silently on the task. However, he seemed displeased with that too, constantly nagging from the sidelines. I really couldn't understand what he wanted. It wasn't until 1 a.m. that Kevin was finally satisfied enough to go to sleep. She's supposed to arrive around noon today, so please take care of it. However, when I woke up, my body felt as heavy as lead. Just to be sure, I took my temperature and it was over 100 degrees. Instead of showing concern, Kevin made a grimace. What are you doing at a time like this? I'll handle it somehow. Really, you're so useless. Kevin was unusually irritable. His mother held that much significance for him. I had been lying down until just before my mother-in-law's arrival. But there was no sign of recovery. It's been a while, Judy. Thank you for coming all the way. Please, come in. I managed to greet my mother-in-law, but I don't remember much after that. I was chatting with her in the living room. But my condition was only getting worse, and I was nearing my limit. Are you okay? Yes. What is it? Kevin. Isn't Judy feeling unwell? Huh? That's just because she stayed up late last night. Let her rest a bit. All right. Kevin carried me to the bedroom. Just stay quiet and lie down. I had no energy left to respond. Realizing that there would be a problem, I made a phone call to someone. I don't know how much time had passed when I was awakened by Kevin's voice. Who said you could sleep? I have a fever over 100 degrees right now. Plus, you were the one who told me to lie down just before. That doesn't mean you can just sleep. Besides, a fever has nothing to do with me. Just manage your own health. He spoke to me as if mocking me for being bedridden with a high fever. When I tried to ignore him. Got some nerve ignoring me, huh? Stop it, please. He forcefully tried to drag me out of bed, grabbing my hand. I desperately shook him off, and he stumbled backward. That's when his switch flipped. Don't you defy your husband. Kevin left the room and then reappeared with a wine bottle. For a moment, I braced for death. Fortunately, his control was poor and the bottle hit the window, shattering into pieces. Don't dodge. What are you doing? What if it had hit me? It's because you don't obey me. I never said you could slack off on the housework. Then, a voice came from behind Kevin. I can't just stand by and listen to that. Kevin immediately turned around. Why are you here? He couldn't hide his shock at the person in front of him. I never imagined you'd go this far. There's a reason for this. How disgraceful. Reprimanded harshly, Kevin quieted down and began to tremble with overwhelming fear. Perhaps he instinctively understood the fate that awaited him. But this wasn't the end. I was determined to settle scores for all I had endured up to now. Why are you here? Kevin asked my father. Why? Because Judy contacted me. She said she had reached her limit. I couldn't stand Kevin's rampage anymore and had called my father for help. He was so furious that he looked like he might hit someone. Wait, please. There's a proper reason for this. A reason, huh? Then let me hear this reason of yours. Well. Kevin fumbled, unable to continue. He had spoken impulsively and hadn't thought about what would come next. What's wrong? Wasn't there a reason? Please wait. There's no reason, is there? Lying now won't do you any good. Yes. Reprimanded by my father, Kevin looked like a frog being stared down by a snake. I hadn't expected things to go so smoothly. There are things a husband can and cannot do. Then, Kevin looked at me and began to say something even more outrageous. It's all Judy's fault, really. I don't know if it's menopause or what. But lately she's just been sleeping and not doing any housework. I couldn't take it anymore and retorted. Don't joke around. Do you have any idea how hard I work every day preparing your meals and doing the housework? You take it for granted, but it's not. Shut up. You just need to obey me. Who do you think allows you to live like this? So that's your true feeling. What? Do you think we're alone here? Kevin, startled, looked ahead. There stood my father, arms crossed. I didn't expect it to be this bad. Looking back, I shouldn't have agreed to the dinner party just because we knew each other. What? Actually, I knew your father a bit. But my father never said a word. That's right. Because your father had borrowed money from me. My father did such a thing? Then, my father chuckled. I immediately understood what he was thinking. Since we're on the subject, I'll have you, his son, repay it. What? But my father is already dead. Even if a parent dies, their debts are inherited by their children. But you can't prove that. Don't worry about that. I've kept the promissory note well preserved. That's unbelievable. Kevin's shoulders slumped in defeat. Unfortunately for him, his troubles were not over yet. Hearing the commotion, his mother came to see what was happening. What's all this noise? His mother was unaware that my father was there. She also didn't know about the terrible things her son had been doing up to this point. Hi, it's been a while. Why are you here? Actually, my daughter asked for my help, so I came here. Help? What for? Kevin, perhaps to avoid drawing attention to himself, shrank smaller and held his breath. Seeing him like that made me burst out laughing, which I did not miss. Why are you making yourself so small? Don't say unnecessary things. Unnecessary? This situation is your fault, you know. Unaware of the situation, my mother-in-law listened as my father explained the details. Kevin, what have you done to Judy? It's not like that, Mom. No excuses. And you might not know this. But I also suffered from menopausal symptoms, so I understand how tough it can be. You too? But your father never did anything terrible like you are now. At this moment, Kevin had no allies. I had not known that my mother-in-law suffered from menopausal symptoms like me. I knew she had become a housewife after turning 50. But since we weren't close after the marriage, she might not have wanted to burden us with her life. He was always proactive in helping out with the household chores, unlike you. Eventually, Kevin seemed resigned and apologized to me. I was wrong. From now on, I'll support you, Judy. Can we start over? It seemed that Kevin was serious. Just when I was about to forgive him, thinking he really meant it. Just wait a minute. What? Are you really okay with this? Prompted by my father's words, I paused to think. Then, as if to warn me, my mother-in-law chimed in. The final decision is yours, Judy, but think it through carefully. I pondered repeatedly whether to forgive Kevin. Just then, I caught him yawning out of the corner of my eye. At that moment, my mind was made up. I've made my decision. Is that so? You're going to give me another try, right? I took a deep breath before declaring to Kevin. I'm getting a divorce. So this is the end for us. I had completely forgotten that I was running a high fever at the time. What are you saying? You can't live on your own, can you? Kevin approached me, his presence imposing fear. Stop it. His mother's command halted him. Don't show any more disgraceful behavior, please. Fine. I understand. I don't need a useless woman like you anyway. With that, Kevin stormed out of the house. Judy, we really caused you trouble. If I had been more attentive. That's not true. I was saved by your words just now. What will you do now? Like I said before, I'll prepare for the divorce. Then I'll prepare on this side too. With a determined look, my father left. My mother-in-law and I remained and talked for a bit. I hope this makes things a bit easier for you, Judy. If things get tough, may I consult with you, Mother? Are you serious? Yes. I would like to hear more from you as someone experienced in life. Understood. If this old woman is okay with you, I'd be happy to help. Several weeks later, we divorced without any issues regarding property division. Shortly after, I moved back to my parents' house to recuperate. About half a year later, I received a call from my ex-husband, who I had not been in contact with. He was living alone, regularly visiting the hospital. What do you want after all this time? I actually have a chronic condition that's getting worse. They said it could turn serious if it continues like this. I figured as much. He must be unable to handle it on his own and is seeking help. So, what do you want me to do? I want you to take care of me from now on. The doctor said it would be tough to manage alone. Is there any benefit for me in doing that? It would just be for a while, just until I recover. His selfishness seemed unchanged. Did he really think his ex-wife would agree to such a request? If he did, that was truly wishful thinking. Why don't you ask your mother then? I already did, but she refused. That figures. If I were in his mother's place, I wouldn't want to care for him either. That's unfortunate. That's why I'm asking you, Judy. As much as I'd like to help, it's impossible. Maybe if you had asked earlier. Besides, I'm not free either, so I'm going to hang up now. My ex-husband then pleaded more desperately. I apologize for everything. It was all my fault. That doesn't show any real sincerity. I was enjoying this exchange. I never intended to lend a hand. But I wanted to let him grasp for hope and then face despair. I won't ever do it again. Please. That's impossible. He kept apologizing over and over, but I was starting to get bored. I'm sorry, but I can't take care of you. I'm still dealing with menopause myself. How am I supposed to care for you in this condition? Desperate, Kevin didn't seem to care about appearances anymore. Please. You're all I have right now. It's all too late. Regretting and apologizing now doesn't turn back time. I've learned my lesson and understand now. So. He didn't give up and kept pressing. He might sound remorseful, but forgiving him now would undo all the progress I'd made. I've come this far on my own, so you should just do what you like now. It will be easier for you that way. What am I supposed to do then? You might have forgotten, but I divorced you, remember? We can't live together anyway. Are you serious? Don't make me repeat myself. Talking to you just adds to my stress, goodbye. With that, I hung up the phone. His needing care was none of my concern. I muttered, serves you right. After that, being free from the stress of my ex-husband, my health began to improve. I was looking forward to returning to work soon. One morning, something else came up. Do you remember what I told Kevin before? About how his father had debts? Yes, that's right. It took some time, but it looks like I can finally make a claim. A bit anxious, I asked my father a question. Out of curiosity, how much is it? $30,000. What? That much? Well, a lot happened back then. Though I have the promissory note, I never really planned on having it repaid. But this time, I couldn't overlook it. My father's expression seemed a bit sad. I didn't know much about the relationship between my father-in-law and him. But it must have been a good one. However, Kevin had ruined even that. There was no way he could prepare such a large sum now, but I felt no sympathy. It was merely a punishment. Judy, can I talk to you for a moment? What happened? I had become more frequent in contacting my mother-in-law. It's about Kevin. I heard through the grapevine that he's filed for bankruptcy. He filed for bankruptcy? Yes. Apparently, he couldn't manage living on his own. I hope he learns his lesson from this. I wonder. He's been like this for years. Well, it's none of our business anymore. You're right about that. Talking with my mother-in-law was genuinely enjoyable. Yet, I'm also getting on in years. How much time I have left, I don't know. Yet, I plan to cherish each day and live it to the fullest. Please consider how your husband feels, unable to sleep due to our baby's nightly crying. You can't manage the housework or childcare, you're an incomplete wife. Isn't it shameful for a housewife? If you want to start over, cool your head and then come back. Despite the late hour, my husband heartlessly locked me and our 4-month-old daughter out of the house. Even when she cries, he doesn't hold her. Instead, he hurries to another room, always making sure to click his tongue audibly. Even when I feed her formula or change her diapers, I panic if she doesn't stop crying. I worry more about my husband's mood than about our daughter's condition. The postpartum fatigue was more enduring than I expected. And my husband was utterly indifferent. The man I once loved had changed, and gradually, I felt nothing towards him. My name is Kelly, and I'm a 28-year-old housewife. After graduating from a technical college, I worked at a web company but resigned when I got married. My partner was Ben, a salesperson I met at the company where I worked reception. He initiated conversations with me often, skillful with his words, which quickly drew me in, as I was shy and inexperienced in love. He complimented how gracefully I moved, saying, "You were so beautiful I couldn't take my eyes off you." Which led me to boldly pursue him, and we started dating. I was so blindly in love that I followed almost everything he said. When he expressed a desire for me to focus on household duties after marriage, I prioritized his wishes over my job, which I had enjoyed. During our dating, he'd say, "I'll earn the money, so I want my wife to focus on the house. And I want children in 3 years. They should learn this and that." I found his strong opinions about our married life charming, and felt happy to be by his dependable side. Indeed, as a trader, my husband had a good income and was on a successful career path. However, he was extremely concerned about appearances and demanded perfection in my housework. He had many friends and would often invite colleagues over without notice, which made those times particularly challenging. Even though I was at home, I could never relax. And those who drank badly would make noise late into the night, preventing us from having a peaceful weekend. Yet, it was better than him coming home in the morning after a night out. And I was happy when he completely stopped this behavior after I became pregnant. He often spoke grandly, perhaps due to his job. But I tried to see it as part of his profession and cherished the joy of our growing family. However, after giving birth to our daughter, I began to experience hell. 4 months after our beloved daughter's birth, she often smiled and recently started rolling over. My husband remained busy as usual, leaving my daughter and me mostly alone from morning to night. I was well aware of this, but it seemed he had no interest in our daughter at all. Unless I brought her up, she was never a topic of conversation between us. Even when she slept in the crib right in front of him, he ignored her. And if she fussed even a little at night, he would click his tongue. There were days when I was so sleep-deprived that I didn't notice my daughter crying. On such days, my husband would walk irritably to the next room, without even trying to hold her. The following day, he would invariably scold me, saying, "Don't you have any parental awareness? The room's a mess, laundry's piling up, and what are you doing all day? On top of that, you won't let your tired husband sleep. What kind of harassment is this?" As he stomped around before leaving for work. Which one of us lacks parental awareness? I wanted to retort multiple times. But it was true that both my housekeeping and childcare had become subpar. My in-laws, who visited often, were also concerned. "I'm sorry, I haven't been able to clean properly." I apologized while serving coffee, but they both shook their heads. "Kelly, you're doing enough for our son. We'll make sure to talk to him. Plus, she's such a cute child." It's understandable if housekeeping slips a bit. He doesn't understand a mother's heart at all. My mother-in-law, in particular, was supportive and had repeatedly called my husband to advocate for me. However, this backfired, and my husband's visits to his parents' home, which had been monthly, drastically decreased. Amidst this, I received news that my sister, Megan, had quit her job and was returning to our hometown. "I haven't greeted your husband and child yet, so I'll drop by to say hello." Unlike me, Megan is bright and lively but also headstrong, and quick to speak her mind if she dislikes something. This resignation likely stemmed from a disagreement with a boss or colleague, as this was not her first job change for such reasons. I invited her over when my husband was off work, thinking I might need to intervene if they clashed, but surprisingly, they got along well right from the start. I was slightly disappointed but relieved and watched over their interaction. As the day turned to evening, Megan showed no signs of leaving. My husband naturally said, "Make sure you prepare a meal for Megan." And I was taken aback. I only had ingredients for 2. And I wished he had told me earlier if this was the plan. Unable to interrupt their lively conversation, I managed to prepare a meal for 3 using whatever was available. Megan scrutinized the table full of dishes, and I had a bad feeling, which turned out to be justified. Is this nutritionally balanced? The mix of various dishes looks off, and the portions seem bulked up. Isn't this bad for someone breastfeeding? It's pitiful for the child, Ben. Though she tried to look concerned, a sneer twisted her lips. That unchanged, mean-spirited face from our childhood was why I still preferred to avoid her. Do you agree with Megan too? I didn't say anything because you're my wife. But it's frustrating to think that the money I worked hard to earn is wasted like this. Just because you had a child, you act like you're in charge, hardly doing any laundry or cleaning. The baby cries so much at night, it's making me anxious about our future. Quick to join in, my husband began to blame me alongside my sister. Watching them, I felt something inside me breaking. This is serious. I have some time before I start working again. So how about I take care of the house instead of you, Kelly? That's a great idea. This way, Kelly can focus on what she loves most, taking care of the child. By the time I realized it, they were both looking at me together. Noticing my confusion, Megan dramatically sighed. Kelly, you've always been like this. You're not single anymore, you know? Ben will suffer if things continue this way. I'm saying I'll come and do the housework for you. We can't ask for that, it's a family matter. I didn't expect Megan to stay so late today, so I just made do with what we had. Normally, it's fine. Having my difficult sister come into our home could lead to anything. She was my sister by blood, but I couldn't stand the thought of her invading my space. It's your fault things have gotten to this point. Don't make excuses. Use this as a chance to rethink how you should be as a wife. My husband seemed pleased to have an ally, and his taunts grew harsher. Megan's frequent visits to our house were almost forcefully decided, and I felt suffocated. The next day, Megan showed up at my house early in the morning, carrying several bags. "What's with all the bags?" I asked, and she replied with a sneer. "Just in case I end up staying overnight. I'm not like you, who only prepared food for two knowing I was coming." "Where's Ben?" I asked. When she said he was at work, Megan plopped down on the sofa, looking bored, and started fiddling with her phone. "Aren't you going to do anything?" I asked. "What's with that tone?" It's unbelievable, considering I came here to help. Besides, housework is just about cleaning what's visible. It doesn't take much time, right? Aren't you annoyed, being bossed around by your husband all the time? Her response made me realize we truly couldn't understand each other. As the saying goes, invisible housework is endless. And housewives don't have the luxury of time to argue back. However, after 3 days of Megan being around, I grew accustomed to the situation and felt less irritated. In fact, my husband was so enamored with Megan that he was always in a good mood, which made it easier for me as he stopped worrying about our daughter's night cries. But I was uncomfortable with how close my husband and sister seemed, despite being in-laws. I hesitated to speak out, fearing they would gang up on me if I did. Since we stopped visiting my in-laws, they hardly contacted us, making it difficult to seek their advice casually. As I lived with this unresolved tension, a serious incident occurred. Megan slipped while holding my daughter, nearly dropping her. Shocked, my daughter started crying loudly, and I impulsively grabbed her from Megan's arms. "Why are you handling her without permission? I won't forgive you if something happens to her." Megan, who had never seen me yell before, flinched for a moment but quickly twisted her face and snapped. She squirmed, and I lost balance. She didn't fall, so there's no need to make such a big deal. She's not cute at all, just like you. Maybe if she experiences a little pain from falling, she'll learn not to cry at night. She hurled unbelievable words at my 4-month-old, and then headed to my husband's room. Shortly after, I heard my husband's footsteps approaching, and I braced myself. "What are you thinking? You two need to leave." As expected, my husband yelled at me. Despite holding my still crying daughter, he continued to berate me without care. "After all the help from your sister, aren't you ashamed? You failed to manage the housework yourself, yet you blow up over someone else's minor mistake. I never thought you were such a despicable woman. I don't want to see your face for a while, so please leave. If you really want to stay, then cool off before coming back." He pushed me towards the entrance before I could respond, and I found myself outside with my daughter. Hastily grabbing my bag, I got into the car, rocked by the motion of the vehicle. My daughter soon started breathing peacefully in her child seat. I considered finding a hotel but realized I needed to return home for my daughter's diapers and clothes. By the time I had driven over the mountain to the next town and back, it was too late to find an open store. When I returned and tried to unlock our home, I noticed the door was chained from the inside. Hearing the noise, my husband called out from within. "What, you're back already? I'm sick of being kept awake by the crying at night, so just let me sleep soundly tonight. I'm fed up with you letting her cry incessantly like it's some kind of harassment." Both of you don't need to come back until morning. It's one thing to say that to me, but to point at our daughter and say don't come back is heartless. If I have to endure such arrogance from this man, I'd rather live a hard life just with my daughter. I didn't respond to my husband's words and got back into the car. As I drove out of our driveway, I regretted not grabbing at least my daughter's belongings. But the thought of running into my sister inside the house was too unpleasant. After checking that my daughter was still asleep, I headed to a place I used to visit often. About 30 minutes of driving through the nearly deserted streets at night. I arrived at the spot, relieved to see the lights on. I knocked on the door, and my mother-in-law emerged, eyes wide, exclaiming, "What are you doing here at this hour?" My father-in-law appeared behind her, also surprised, but they quickly invited me inside. Sensing the urgency from the way I arrived, despite the late hour, they brought out formula and diapers for my daughter. They had kept these supplies just in case we ever needed to stay. A kind gesture from when we used to visit more frequently. Feeling guilty that they had kept these items even though we hadn't visited in a while, I nearly cried. My mother-in-law, seeing my face, offered me a warm cup of tea. My father-in-law lovingly held my daughter, who he hadn't seen in a long time. Reluctant to burden my kind in-laws with my troubles, I finally opened up for my daughter's sake. I told them everything, how my husband showed no interest in our daughter, how he'd run to another room at night because her crying disturbed his sleep, and how he and my sister ridiculed my ability to manage the house and childcare since our daughter was born. Their expressions grew stern when I told them that today he had kicked out both me and my daughter. My father-in-law angrily said to my mother-in-law, "Call him. I can't believe he'd kick his wife and child out at such a late hour." My mother-in-law tried to call my husband, but he didn't answer. He usually set his phone to a loud volume because of his job and sales, and he had always answered calls during our fights. So him not picking up suggested he might have turned his phone off. Wondering how else to reach him, I remembered the baby monitor I had bought. I had linked the monitor with my smartphone to keep an eye on things while I was busy around the house. Since it was placed in the living room where the crib was, I could remotely check what was happening there. I did want to know what my husband was up to. What I saw through the live feed, however, was my husband and sister in a compromising position. A silent scream escaped me. A part of me had suspected something like this. Their overly familiar behavior, conspiring against me, it all made sense now. I knew my husband preferred women like my sister. Despite feeling numb, my heart ached. Determined not to let this pain be in vain, I started recording the video. "Mother, father, would you please watch this with me?" When they saw the footage, my mother-in-law leaned on my father-in-law for support, and he turned pale, staring at the screen. It was harsh for them, but I needed witnesses to what I had seen. My father-in-law continued to call my husband, to no avail. During this time, I contacted my own parents to briefly explain the situation. They immediately set out to come to us, and we decided to meet urgently at my now tainted home. Just an hour later, my daughter and I, along with both sets of parents, stood in front of my house. Given the circumstances, we skipped pleasantries, and I led the way by ringing the doorbell. Predictably, my husband and sister ignored it, thinking I had returned. I tried to calm my nerves and kept pressing the bell until, finally, my husband lazily opened the door. That's when our parents stormed in, followed by me and my daughter. My husband panicked at the sight of the incoming relatives. Pitifully, he was only in a t-shirt and boxers. "Hey, what is all this about?" Before I could reply, a woman's scream echoed. From the living room, it was undoubtedly my sister. Inside, she was seated on the floor in her underwear, holding her cheek, possibly struck by one of our parents. My father-in-law forcefully pulled my husband down to sit beside her, and a session of reprimanding began. My parents criticized my sister, and my in-laws scolded my husband. Accusations flew about the inappropriateness of trying to replace a sister, the irresponsibility of throwing out a wife and daughter late at night, and the shamelessness of their actions. Instead of apologizing or showing remorse, their responses were defensive. Why did you have to bring her parents all this way? She must have set up that camera to spy on her husband, right? You're all blaming us, but if Kelly hadn't spied, none of this would have happened. That's a crime too, so she should apologize for spying first. I had no idea there was a camera in the room. You never trusted me, did you? Despite living comfortably off my salary as a housewife, how could you do such a thing? You're the one who destroyed our marriage. You put the crack in it. They teamed up against me once again, confirming how little they respected me. I wondered what my parents really thought of me. Humiliated by my own sister stealing my husband. As I felt tears welling up, I forced myself to meet their eyes with strength. I bought that camera for our daughter, and I'm sorry to have used it this way. But now I see, you two are truly despicable. For the first time, my husband seemed to realize something as he remembered that camera. Our first purchase for our daughter after learning she was on the way. He fell silent. But my sister continued to retaliate. So what? It's still spying. Trying to gain sympathy with that won't work. We're not children, we need to look at the facts. Kelly, you've always been like this. Resorting to underhanded tactics, despite your nasty personality. It's no wonder I'm upset when you've snagged such a good husband. While I'm also of marriageable age. I thought I'd replace you. And find happiness since you can't handle household duties or childcare. The housework and childcare excuse is just an afterthought. Isn't it really all about Ben's money? When I said this, Megan faltered. Without missing a beat, I pressed on. Ever since I got married, you've been incessantly asking about Ben's salary and bonuses. Even our parents had to calm you down when you wouldn't stop. I thought maybe you were just concerned about my financial well-being. But you never stopped talking about money. Is that why you're still not married? Megan stood up, her face flushed. Saying not married yet was the most effective provocation for her, who was anxious about marriage. She spoke even faster than before. Don't get cocky just because you and your child aren't as cute as me. How far do you plan to go to interfere with me? But you heard it from Ben just now, didn't you? He hates you too. So, if you were gone, everything would be resolved. Don't you think it'd be sad for your child to have only one parent? I'll raise her much better than you ever could, so hand her over. Megan marched towards me, trying to grab me. I had always cowered before her bluster, but today was different. With a sharp smack, Megan staggered backward. Her cheek reddening on the opposite side she had held before. Enough with insulting my daughter. She's not some object. If you want custody that badly, we can settle it in court. My feelings for this child are not as tainted as yours. Don't compare us. My mother and mother-in-law calmed me down from either side. Protected by our parents, my daughter and I decided to go back to my parents' home for the time being. Ben sat on the floor in a daze, and Megan, tired from her rant, just glared silently as we headed for the door. We said our goodbyes to my in-laws in the parking lot. We're on your side, Kelly. It's going to be tough, so feel free to ask us for anything. Holding back tears, I deeply bowed to my in-laws, grateful for their support. Weeks passed, and time seemed to crawl until the court delivered the verdict. Despite cutting off my husband and sister, the fear of being separated from my daughter lingered. The divorce was finalized due to the evidence from the baby monitor, and I was awarded custody. Through a lawyer, I also ensured that Ben and Megan would start paying child support and compensation next month. Ben had taken over the repayment of a student loan that my in-laws had been covering. Overwhelmed by the sudden financial responsibility, he called to complain. But I politely told him never to contact me again and cut off all communication. Megan also called to complain about the compensation, so I politely suggested she discuss it with her new husband, Ben. However, Megan, already in conflict with her former husband, who was now sleeping at his office, began harassing his workplace about her compensation. This led to rumors at his company about his unstable ex-wife, causing him embarrassment and eventually his resignation. With no income from her former husband, Megan's relationship with him worsened, and she took on debt. Desperate, she called me, hoping for reconciliation with our parents and financial help. I listened to her plight with a smile but firmly said no. The paperwork for the divorce and move was smoothly handled, with the active help of my parents and in-laws. My daughter, cheered by her loving grandparents, has become even more joyful. Now, as we start our life together, just the two of us, I have no worries. Peaceful days await us, no doubt. I'm marrying my 23-year-old lover. Actually, we're not legally married, so there's no division of property. This shocking statement came from my husband, who I had been with for 3 years. In disbelief, I was confronted with the marriage registration form he claimed to have submitted to the city hall. There's no way I'd actually marry someone like you. You can't even manage to be a decent housekeeper, so stop dreaming. Laughing mockingly, he tore up the marriage form, and the pieces scattered all over the floor. The 3 years of patience I had endured seemed to collapse with a crash. Working in banking, he was a promising man on a path to a bright future. To him, laughing in his triumph, I must have seemed like a joke. Despite this, I responded clearly. Then you're fired. What? He still hadn't realized it. The real joke here wasn't me, it was him. My name is Sandra Ford. Since graduating high school, I had been working as a cashier at a local supermarket. I wasn't wealthy, but I lived a happy life, suited to living alone and fulfilling my hobby as a writer. It was a carefree daily life for me, but my friend Amy, who worked at a bank, always seemed worried about me. Aren't you going to find someone nice soon, Sandra? It's going to be tough if you stay alone forever. I don't have any romantic prospects, and I enjoy writing novels more anyway. Don't say that. I have someone I want you to meet. He's a senior colleague at my workplace. How about it? Amy had been happily married for 2 years. If she recommended him so highly, married life must be delightful. Thus, I agreed to meet this man. His name was David, and I was struck by his handsomeness at first glance. He was well dressed in a suit, and his tidy hair and clean aura completely matched my taste. It seemed David also had a good impression of me. And after meeting several times, we officially started dating. Within less than a year, we were married. I couldn't have imagined such a whirlwind marriage back then. But as a newlywed, I was filled with happiness. I was blissfully unaware of the ending this marriage would come to meet. The sense of discomfort started a year into our marriage. David, an elite bank employee with a promising future, rarely took breaks. He hardly ever came home on time. And if there were business matters on weekends, he had to attend. That left all the housework to me, something I was willing to do to support him. However, gradually, David stopped showing appreciation for it. One day, when I was slightly ill and felt dizzy while folding laundry, I took some medicine and went to bed. Waking up to the sound of David returning, I greeted him with a headache. "Welcome home. I'm feeling a bit under the weather, and dinner isn't ready yet. I'll make it now, just wait a bit." "Seriously? After I've been working hard until late. It must be nice to be able to laze around using your health as an excuse. I'll eat out, you can have deli foods or something." Not a single word of concern for my health, he quickly left the house. I understood he was tired, but a little worry for me would have been nice. My frustration began to gnaw at me. But that wasn't all. Once, hoping for a day out together, I arranged my day off to match his and suggested shopping. However, David didn't seem to enjoy it at all. He was distracted when I spoke to him and kept checking his watch. "Is something wrong? Do you have some other commitment?" "No, it's just tough not being able to relax at home on my day off." "You can take days off whenever you like. So even if you're tired today, you can just rest again." Maybe compared to your job, but isn't there a better way to say that? That's kind of harsh. Sorry. In your mind, a banker like me and a part-timer like you are on the same level of work. I must have spoken to the wrong person. When he had a bad day at work, he would take his stress out on me like this. He never did this while we were dating. While it might have cleared his mind, it only increased my stress. Don't say things like that. Let's watch a movie. There's a popular one I've heard is good. I'm not interested in that kind of stuff. Go watch it alone if you want. I'll rest at a cafe nearby. Movies were my hobby, but David had never once accompanied me since our marriage. Still, I tried to improve our relationship. I performed all the housework perfectly and expanded my cooking repertoire to suit his tastes, all in hopes of making him happy. But David never thanked me. On the contrary, if I ever seemed to be self-satisfied, he would click his tongue in annoyance. That's what wives are supposed to do, right? What's with that self-righteous look on your face? It's making me sick. Being looked at with such disgust, I was deeply hurt. Since then, my laughter in his presence drastically reduced. Just being together became suffocating, and I started to regret our marriage. By the end of our second year of marriage, I had lost all affection for him and was merely enduring. Still, I tried to hold on to hope for our life together. If it didn't work with just the two of us, maybe adding a third person would help. Thinking a cold husband might become a kind father, I broached the subject of wanting children with David. However, his response was merciless. "Looking at you doesn't raise my spirits at all. Don't talk about such disgusting things. Just thinking about it makes me feel sick." I took care of my appearance, using makeup and dressing well. Not to boast, but I believe I look above average. Yet David staunchly refused to spend time with me. From then on, as if he hated even seeing my face, he often made excuses to stay out late, eventually returning home reeking of women's perfume. That was too much for me, and when I confronted him, it was a waste of time. On the contrary, it seemed as if I had touched a raw nerve, and he erupted in anger. "Shut up. What I do with the money I earn is my business. It's fine if you want to have fun. But coming home at this hour smelling like perfume is just unreasonable. Who's the unreasonable one here, you incompetent fool? Fueled by alcohol, David retorted aggressively. All you do is household chores that anyone could handle. You couldn't survive without someone like me to support you. So don't get all high and mighty. That's cruel. I work too, you know. I had continued my part-time job even after marriage. And earned a little extra from my writing hobby. It might not be much compared to David, but it was enough to live on my own. Despite this, David started defending the girls at the nightclubs rather than his own wife. Unlike you, Hannah is a good girl. She's cute and works hard. She's much more respectable and earns more than a jobless person like you. The look of adoration on his face was clear. He was obviously infatuated. It was disgusting to see my own husband making such a face for another woman. Since then, just seeing David's face made me feel sick. And I no longer wanted children with him. Even when he didn't come home, I didn't feel lonely. The only time that increased was the time I spent alone in front of the computer. It feels like I'm living the same life as when I was single. Wanting someone to listen to these problems, I decided to talk to Amy, who had introduced me to David. She listened sympathetically and almost started crying while talking to me. So David was like that. He seemed so serious and honest at the bank. What a disappointment. I'm really sorry, it was me who introduced him. No, it was my decision to get married. But thinking that it might stay like this forever is just too hard. It was the first time I mentioned considering divorce. I couldn't look her in the eye, but I felt like I couldn't keep going much longer. Sensing this, Amy encouraged me with kind words. We're still young, maybe it's better to split up? You're not jobless, right? Yeah, I think it might be time for me to call it. If things don't improve in a year, I'll make a decision. That's a good idea. Tell me when that time comes. I'll do whatever I can to help. True friends are indeed valuable. Talking to Amy helped me sort out my feelings. One more year. If things didn't improve by then, I would leave. I resolved myself once again. If I end up living alone, I'll need to increase my part-time hours. And maybe this is the only time I can immerse myself in writing. Maybe this experience would even help me write something interesting. With plenty of time alone, I continued to face the computer screen, escaping from the harsh reality. And so the third year came. David's behavior didn't improve but got even worse. After mentioning Hannah, he stopped using drinking parties as an excuse. I was drinking at Hannah's place. She's totally fallen for me. A good woman knows a good man when she sees one. Was he not aware that he was admitting to cheating? I ignored him but recorded his voice. I also secretly followed him when he went out on the weekends. And filmed him meeting up with a woman. He, now over 30 with increasing wrinkles, was unfit for the young and cute girl he walked arm in arm with. That girl was Hannah. I had confirmed she worked at the place listed on a business card found in David's suit. And my preparations for leaving were all set. Hey, how long are we going to keep living like this? A year after talking to Amy, I brought it up to David. I'm at my limit. I've been patient, hoping your behavior would improve. But I can't take it anymore. Can we get a divorce? We were having dinner together for a change when I asked. And David's eyes widened in shock. Divorce. You want a divorce from me? Yes. You know why, don't you? I thought he would accept smoothly, so his reaction surprised me. Perhaps he was reluctant to lose someone who did the housework. I braced myself for a fight, but I was completely wrong. You're mistaken if you think getting divorced will get you money and freedom. David scoffed at me. I was taken aback by his reaction. What's so funny? After being treated like a housekeeper and cheated on, it's only natural. I haven't cheated, you see. David smirked and went to his room, returning with a piece of paper that made my face turn pale. Is that our marriage certificate? Indeed, it was our marriage registration form, which was supposed to have been submitted to the city hall long ago. David had said he would handle it before he went to work, but why was it here? There's no way I'd actually register our marriage. You're not even a good housekeeper, so stop dreaming. David mercilessly tore it up and threw it around the room. We weren't actually registered? That's right. So you're not a wife, but just a freeloader. There's no way cheating could apply in our situation. I was stunned, and David looked pleased with himself. Maybe it's time for you to leave this house. Thanks for your time as a housekeeper. What do you mean by that? I'm marrying my 23-year-old lover. Actually, we're not legally married, so there's no division of property. Furious at David's triumphant look, I couldn't contain my anger. Who would have thought all my patience was just a farce? Reality is stranger than fiction. The efforts of these tough 3 years crumbled with a crash. To him, I must have seemed utterly ridiculous. I finally reached my breaking point as he laughed. Then you're fired. What? He might have thought it was just a sore loser's complaint as he sneered at me. But he still hadn't realized that he was the one who was about to face hell. A jobless person like me firing you? What are you even talking about? Don't make me laugh. David looked down on me with a half smile. But I wasn't joking. Knowing it was useless to talk anymore, I called Amy right then. Hello, Amy? Sorry for calling out of the blue. I've decided to break up. Can you help me with the aftermath? Got it. I'll handle things well here, so take care. Although it was a short conversation, Amy seemed to understand. David, who overheard, furrowed his brows and tilted his head. Amy, that junior of mine? Whatever you ask her, she can't do anything. He still appeared confident. I play the ideal person at work. No one will believe I'm the bad guy if you and Amy work together. In fact, doing that might endanger Amy's position. David has been a top employee since we met. Amy was deceived by that as well and introduced him to me. His reputation within the company may indeed be admirable. However, that was of no concern to me. Don't worry, Amy's words will definitely get through. Especially to that bank branch manager. To the branch manager. As I said this, David's expression tensed up slightly. Why are you so sure that only the branch manager believes Amy's stories? Could it be Amy is the branch manager's mistress? The branch manager is almost 60 years old. The idea of a boss having a mistress in the company seemed to disgust David. Although what he was doing was hardly any different. Quite the convenient narrative for him. Don't get it twisted. The only scumbag who keeps a mistress and fools around is you, David. It's a privilege of attractive men. Not bad, right? But yeah, the branch manager and Amy. That's not likely since there's almost a parent-child age gap. David laughed at his own words. However, he suddenly seemed to realize something. Frozen with a smile, he then looked at me. Wait a minute, Amy and the branch manager. Yes, those two are father and daughter. David seemed truly unaware as he struggled to process my words. In fact, Amy works at the bank where her father is the branch manager. Amy is already married, so her last name has changed. Plus, she wanted to succeed on her own merit at work. So she never let anyone know she was his daughter. No way. I've met with the branch manager privately a few times. But he never mentioned having a daughter. He's just keeping his promise to Amy. She means that much to him. That's why if she speaks up, your position might be in jeopardy. David seemed unconvinced, yet he appeared alarmed. He banged on the table to intimidate. Tell Amy to stop snitching right now. It's too late to panic now. You're going to marry your mistress eventually, right? Sooner or later, everyone at work will find out anyway. Don't joke with me. If an elite like me leaves, it will impact the bank's performance. I'm not some replaceable nobody like you. Frustrated, David scratched his head and then made a suggestion, breathing heavily. Fine. I'll pay you then. Give Amy money to stop her. I don't need your money. Don't lie, you're about to lose your house and everything. It must be hard to live off me as a parasite, right? Despite the situation, David still looked down on me and pulled out about $500 from his wallet. He flaunted it in front of me. I was thinking of throwing you out penniless. But I'll be generous and give you this much. Now, make Amy shut up. You always care about yourself, don't you? I sighed in exasperation. Reluctantly, I took out my smartphone, and David looked relieved. However, his expression changed instantly when he saw the screen. You haven't been on the phone this whole time, have you? I never said I hung up, did I? As I smiled in response, Amy, furious on the other end of the phone, raised her voice. I trusted you, and I'm so disappointed. I won't forgive you for making my friend sad. Wait, hold on. This is a misunderstanding. Outsiders shouldn't interfere in a couple's fight. This has gone beyond just a fight. I've recorded everything you said, and I'll let my father hear it. Be prepared. The call finally ended there. Left behind was just a pitiful man, his anger with nowhere to go. What the hell? Suddenly the branch manager's daughter, I don't understand. He repeatedly slammed the table, making a tremendous noise. I felt a chill not knowing when his fists might turn towards me. Why would you go to such lengths for someone like you? To the bank, losing me would be a bigger loss than your sadness. Really? Maybe your value is actually less than mine. I said this and took out my own bank book. David showed no interest in it. Didn't I manage that account since we started dating? What's it to you now? That's the one for my part-time job, right? This is a different account. What? Why would someone like you have two accounts? Confused, he snatched the bank book from me and scrutinized it, repeatedly checking the figures. Wait a minute, how much is in here? About $500,000? I'm not sure of the total since some of it is invested. David didn't seem to hear me. In reality, I had been making a decent income from my writing hobby. Initially, it was about as much as my part-time job, not enough to feel secure. Concerned about my future, I had Amy handle my investments since I lived at home. I used the part-time income for daily expenses and saved all my writing earnings, which accumulated to quite a sum. But back then, $500,000 was unimaginable. How could it have grown so much? That was thanks to David. Since he started spending less time at home and more with his mistress in recent years, I dedicated all my newfound alone time to writing. As a result, my update frequency and reader base grew significantly. Recently, a popular site even requested a one-shot from me. My online novels' advertising revenue skyrocketed with the increased readership, substantially boosting my income compared to my single days. If I were to close this account now, the bank would not be unscathed. Why keep working part-time if you're earning so much? You planned to deceive me from the start. I thought it was important to work outside too. If you just stay home, you won't learn common sense. I didn't want to become unreasonable like you. I'm unreasonable. I'm far above the average men out there. Being skilled at work means nothing if your personality is twisted. With that, I stood up and walked past a stunned David. I'm leaving this house as I intended. I'll be contacting you through my lawyer to demand compensation. I have the recording from earlier and all the evidence prepared. Wait, please. Can we maybe not go through with the divorce? It pains me to think of you alone. He must have been dazzled by money. Where did all his anger go? He tried to appease me with a gentle tone, thinking I would reconsider. But it only made me lose respect for him. There's nothing to divorce over, we were never married in the first place. We're strangers, so don't meddle in my affairs. Please reconsider. The bank already thinks poorly of me. And if they see a loss because of me, I'll be off the promotion track. Even now, all he cares about is himself. His self-centered remarks made me laugh outright. If you need consolation so badly, why don't you go to Hannah? You've been doing that all along, haven't you? At my words, David was at a loss for words and stuttered. I stormed out of the room and started walking aimlessly, seeing his face contorted in the way I had so often felt oppressed brought me profound relief. I planned to collect my belongings later when David was at work. That day, I indulged in a nice meal and stayed at a hotel near a large station I had always wanted to try. The fluffy bed made me sleepy the moment I sat down. I relished the time of doing nothing, savoring my newfound freedom. I need to consult a lawyer and also focus on my upcoming writing deadlines. At that moment, I thought I was free from David and that it was all over. But that was naive of me. I had yet to learn just how vile a man David was. That became clear about a week after I left the house. Amy informed me that due to her father's discovery of David's misdeeds, his dismissal was decided. However, that didn't mean he could just stop coming to work the next day. Since David was a capable employee, he needed to hand over his clients, requiring his attendance for a few more days. Other employees, aware of why he was fired, gave him cold stares during the handover process. I thought that served as a kind of punishment, but there was another problem. Sandra, have you withdrawn any money from your writing account recently? No. What's up all of a sudden? The amount doesn't match what we checked during the last investment review. You don't usually use this account, so I was wondering, she said. She seemed to think that I might have withdrawn some money for living in a hotel. However, as I mentioned earlier, I don't recall using any money from that account. I have no idea, but if someone likely did it, they would remember. Could David have done something? I immediately headed to the bank where David worked. Approaching the counter, David happened to call my number. Why are you here? Did you come to cool off? He didn't seem repentant. Not wanting to waste time on idle chatter, I cut to the chase. I'd like to see the transaction history of my writing account. Could you check it for me? His face visibly paled. Sweat beaded on his wrinkled forehead. You don't need to check that now. There are other customers, let's do this later. I need it now. Or is there a reason you can't show it? When I spoke in a low voice, David reluctantly took the bank book and disappeared to the back. He returned with the transaction history, which I immediately checked. Sure enough, there was a record of $50,000 being withdrawn a few days ago. That was no small amount. This isn't my transaction. It's unauthorized use, so I'll have to report this to the police. Wait, please. There's no need to make a big deal out of it. As I muttered under my breath, David suddenly shouted out. Indeed, I had suspected David, but I was taken aback by how quickly he slipped up. Did you do it, then? You knew and came here? I've been tricked by you again. This is the worst. He must have thought I had investigated everything beforehand. The foolish thief had confessed all on his own. I have no intention of forgiving you, but tell me why you did this. Look, I didn't steal this for personal gain. I just borrowed it. I don't want your money. Then why take it? I waited for him to explain further. Then, David started saying something odd again. You said you were going to demand compensation from me, right? But I'm about to lose my job and have no income. I have a future to think about with Hannah, so I can't waste money. That's why I thought I'd use your money to pay you off. What are you saying? You stole money to pretend you'd paid? That's right. I memorized your account number when I saw it last week. I can check the PIN as a bank employee. Proudly explaining his methods, he shrugged regretfully. But now that I've been caught, I'll return it to your account right away. Just wait a minute. As he got up to leave, I quickly grabbed his arm. Do you think just returning it ends this? What now? Are you going to demand compensation for such a small thing? That's petty. There was no harm done, just laugh it off. It's impossible. This is a criminal act, and I'm reporting it to the police. Hey, stop. This time, David grabbed my arm and yanked it roughly, causing me to stumble and fall over the counter. As he raised his fist to strike, I braced for the impact. But nearby employees restrained him, and he couldn't move. Let go. She's playing the victim, trying to take everything from me. The real victim is me. Someone had called the police, and within minutes, sirens were audible. Police officers entered and dragged David away. Sandra. Tell them to stop. I have a future with Hannah. His face was a mess of tears and snot, but I said nothing. At least he showed no sign of reflection, so he deserved no future. After the commotion, David was prosecuted for embezzlement. He'd be under police custody for a few years, a relief since I wouldn't have to see his face. He'd balked at paying me $50,000 in compensation. But it turned out he'd be charged with a much higher amount. First, he had to repay the stolen money plus compensate for a minor injury I sustained during the bank scuffle, totaling $80,000. The bank also demanded $200,000 for reputation-related losses. After his arrest, many deals fell through, causing great trouble for the bank. David would lead a difficult life even after his release. I hoped he would realize his mistakes by then. Separately, I claimed $30,000 in damages from Hannah, his mistress, who paid immediately. It was painfully clear she wanted to end this chapter quickly. David and she would likely never meet again. After the bank incident, Amy profusely apologized to me. She said it was her fault for the money being stolen, but I wasn't mad at her at all. She even suggested changing banks, but I immediately refused. I trust you, Amy, so let's continue as we are. Besides, I wouldn't have time to worry about money anymore. I needed to focus on my writing series. It had been a tumultuous 3 years, but the experience had undoubtedly helped me grow. I vowed to live for myself and began typing passionately on the keyboard.